A man in Florida, aka a Florida man, is sharing his story of an attack by a rare American crocodile in Everglades National Park over the weekend. He was bitten, but he did manage to survive.
Florida has become a revolving door for deadly animals, but this latest invader is the most dangerous one yet. A single person's mistake in the exotic pet trade has dropped a super predator into the heart of the Everglades. You're about to see how one reckless act turned a peaceful swamp into a battlefield for survival. This is the part of the story that nobody talks about, because the real monster might actually be us. Predators on the run. Even though they look similar to most folks, these two reptiles have very different personalities. Alligators are the brute force enforcers that like to show everyone they are in charge. On the other hand, the American crocodile is very shy and hard to find. If you are lucky enough to see one, it will usually try to swim away as fast as it can. These animals want nothing to do with humans. Plain and simple, their safety record is amazing. Believe it or not, there has never been a single confirmed case of an American crocodile taking a human life in the wild in United States history. For generations, these two species lived in peace. The alligators stayed in the fresh water, and the crocodiles stayed in the salt water. They respected the lines drawn in the mud and shared the land without going to war. It was a balance that nature spent millions of years making perfect. We knew where they lived, and we knew how they acted. The system worked because every animal stayed in its own lane. But in the year 2009, the rules of the swamp were suddenly broken. Veteran airboat captains who knew every gator and croc in their area started seeing things that made no sense. They noticed that the biggest and strongest American crocodiles were gone. These were the ones that had held the best spots for over 10 years. You might think they just moved to a new home, but the places where they used to lay in the sun were now totally empty. Something was making these top hunters run away, and it had to be something huge. If a giant reptile that is afraid of nothing starts running, you know there is a major problem. Most people look right past this part, but the silence in the swamp was the loudest warning of all. While everyone was looking for a simple answer, the situation on the ground was getting weirder by the minute. Rumors started to spread about strange sightings in places where crocodiles should never be. People were seeing them in canals and near neighborhoods far away from the deep swamp. Even worse, searchers found the remains of crocodiles and alligators that looked like they had been attacked with incredible force. These were the rulers of the Everglades, and they were being cleared out. How these giants were vanishing without a big struggle was a question that nobody could answer. The nurseries that should have been full of baby crocodiles were now barren and quiet. An entire food chain was falling apart because the natural bosses of the land were acting like prey. When a top hunter decides to run away, the whole order of nature changes. This was not just a small change. It was a sign that a dangerous and unknown force was taking over the heart of Florida. But here's where it gets tricky, because the behavior of the animals was not the only thing changing. Fishermen began reporting that crocodiles were suddenly becoming very aggressive. Remember, these animals are usually shy, but now they were snapping at boats and chasing people away. To the scientists, these stories did not add up. They knew that something from outside the swamp was bullying the local kings. Most folks in the area had a theory that it was the famous Burmese python, but they were looking in the wrong direction. Hidden shadow. Let's switch gears for a second and look at the most famous villain in the Florida woods. When the reports of missing and hurt crocodiles started piling up, everyone pointed their finger at the Burmese python. These huge snakes are already the boogeymen of the Everglades. They have a reputation for eating almost everything they find, from small raccoons to large deer. It made perfect sense to think these giant snakes had grown big enough to start hunting the crocodile population. We already know that pythons are brave enough to go after big game. Back in the year 2005, a massive python tried to swallow a 6-foot alligator whole. The snake actually burst open because the alligator was too big to handle. This story was all over the news, and it made everyone believe the snakes were winning the war for the swamp. As the python population grew and spread into the saltwater areas where crocodiles live, most people assumed this was just the next part of the fight. But if you look a little closer, you find the real story is much different. The science experts who looked at the remains of the dead crocodiles realized very quickly that this was not the work of a snake. Pythons are hunters that squeeze their prey. They wrap their long bodies around an animal and stop its heart by pressing down hard. They are sneaky and quiet. But the missing crocodiles in this mystery did not have any broken bones or signs of being squeezed. Something else was taking them out, and it was doing it with teeth and speed, not by squeezing. This was a big blow to the python theory. If it was not the snakes, then what could possibly be strong enough to take down a full-grown crocodile? The uncertainty was starting to make people very nervous. This new monster was not afraid to leave a mess behind, which showed it was a top-level hunter. It was clear that a new power had moved into the neighborhood, and it did not care about the old rules. While the public was still worried about snakes, the scientists were starting to look at a new possibility. They needed to find one of these mystery animals and see it with their own eyes. The part that nobody talks about is how long this monster had been hiding right under our noses. It was as if a ghost was moving through the water, leaving nothing but empty nests behind. This leads us right to the next big mystery that happened near the city of Miami. A team from the University of Florida was called to catch a young crocodile that had been spotted in a canal. It was miles away from where crocodiles usually live, and that was the first big red flag. When they finally pulled the animal out of the water, they knew right away that something was wrong. It did not look like the crocodiles they were used to seeing. This animal was the beginning of a discovery that would shock the entire world of science. Monster from across the sea. The part that trips everyone up is how similar some animals can look until you see them up close. When the team got a good look at the young reptile they caught in Miami, they felt a chill. It was a perfect example of what people call the uncanny valley, where something looks almost right but is just off enough to be scary. The snout of this animal was much wider and stronger than a normal Florida crocodile. Its skin was a dark olive-black color, instead of the usual grayish-green. But the most terrifying part was its attitude. Even though it was just a young animal, it was incredibly mean. It showed a type of boldness and aggression that scientists had never seen in native crocodiles, even the fully grown ones. It was not trying to hide, it was trying to fight. The team was totally confused and wondered if they had found a mutant or some kind of weird hybrid. They had no clear answers, so they sent small pieces of skin to a lab to check the DNA. This started a long wait that lasted for months. While they waited, more reports of these strange, aggressive crocodiles kept coming in. Even before the lab results were finished, the researchers noticed something else that was shocking. These mystery crocodiles were growing about 28% faster than the local ones. They were also much bigger than native crocodiles of the same age. Whatever this thing was, it was not just living in Florida. It was doing better than the animals that had been there for millions of years. When the DNA results finally arrived, the news was far worse than anyone had imagined. The DNA did not match the American crocodile at all. It was also not a gator. The results showed a perfect match for a species called Crocodilus niloticus. This meant the aggressive animal found in the Miami Canal was a Nile crocodile from Africa. The idea that a shy local reptile was being replaced by a monster from across the ocean was a nightmare come true. The difference between these two cousins is like night and day. While the Florida crocodile has never taken a human life in the United States, the Nile crocodile is famous for being a man-eater. In its home in Africa, the Nile crocodile is responsible for anywhere from 50 to 200 human deaths every single year. This is a hunter that is built to eat large mammals, and it is known for having a very bad temper. Physically, they are some of the most impressive animals on Earth. They can grow up to 18 feet long and weigh more than 2,000 pounds. Their bite is one of the strongest in the entire animal kingdom. Plain and simple, the local crocodiles were not dying of natural causes. They were being bullied, kicked out of their homes, and maybe even eaten by a cousin that was stronger, faster, and much more mean. A top hunter from 6,000 miles away had moved in and was taking the throne of the Everglades. The identity was confirmed, and the monster was real. Criminal carelessness. Now we have to ask the question that is on everyone's mind. How did an animal from Africa end up in the middle of a Florida swamp? One thing is for sure, these crocodiles did not swim 6,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. To put it in simple words, the only way they got here was because of humans. In South Florida, that usually means the exotic pet trade. There is a huge black market for strange and dangerous animals that operates in the shadows. Even though it is super illegal to own a Nile crocodile without special permits and high security, some reckless people treat these deadly hunters like pets. Here is the part that makes absolutely no sense. People buy these crocodiles when they are small and cute, but they grow up very fast. When the pet becomes a huge, angry man-eater that is too hard to handle, the owners just dump them into the nearest canal. They do not think about the danger they are putting everyone in. After the scientists did more tests, they found that all the captured Nile crocodiles were related. This was proof that they did not get there by accident. They likely all came from a small group of babies that either escaped from a bad facility or were tossed into the swamp by an owner who gave up. The lack of care in that one act is shocking. One person's mistake created a massive threat to the environment. A single reptile released years ago had started a family, which meant these crocodiles had been living in the Everglades for a long time. They were hiding in plain sight and blending in with the local crocodiles because they look so similar at a distance. The real fear was not just that they were there, but where they might go next. The Everglades contains everything they need to grow and have more babies. Plus, Nile crocodiles can handle cold weather much better than local ones. This means they could move north and spread across the entire state. While everyone was looking over here, this was happening right under our feet. Wildlife officials had to move fast to stop the problem before it got out of control. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Commission teamed up with the University of Florida to start a hunt for these invaders. It was a very hard job to find them in the thick grass and deep water, but they knew they had to try. The future of the entire Florida ecosystem was on the line. Could there be more man-eaters hiding in the Florida grass right now? Is it time to close the Everglades to the public? Let us know what you think below. Please like and subscribe.